from gambling away over $20 million to throwing a random person out a window, Charles Barkley's past was pretty dark and chaotic. The player discarded a successful and promising career. The former NBA superstar was known for his impressive skills on the court. He was a fierce competitor and one of the best power forwards in the game during his prime. Barkley played for several teams during his career, from the Philadelphia 76ers to the Phoenix Suns and Houston Rockets. He was also consistently known as an all-star throughout his career, but all this talent and success couldn't keep him from succumbing to all kinds of undesirable things. He was into gambling. His bursts of anger would end in bloody fights, and he even made a few controversial comments which really put people off. These habits ended up overshadowing his skills on court. I mean, he was even sued for $550,000 because of these incidents. One of Barkley's most notorious scandals occurred in Orlando, Florida in 1997. The player was partying at a bar with a bunch of his teammates, including Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, when he ended up throwing a man through a window. The man, Jorge Lugo, claimed that Barkley had punched him in the face before picking him up and throwing him out the window.
I realized there was a certain faction of the black community that went crazy on me, but there was also a certain faction that came to my defense.
The fight, especially the fall, had given him serious injuries on his face and neck. Lugo filed a lawsuit against Barkley, seeking damages for medical bills and lost wages. But Barkley denied the allegations completely. He claimed that he was just defending himself after Lugo had threatened him. Apparently, he'd thrown a glass of ice at him and 3 women who were sitting at his table. And in retaliation, Barkley had chased Lugo to the front of the bar. An off-duty officer tried his best to break the fight up, but the NBA All-Star refused to back down. He wrestled Lugo out of the officer's grasp and threw him through a glass window. Barkley was charged with aggravated battery and resisting arrest without violence. The Rockets guard, Clyde Drexler, bailed him out on a $6,000 bond. Even though both of them had their own sides of the story, Barkley's involvement in such a violent incident tarnished his reputation. People criticized him for his reckless behavior and lack of self-control. After all, it wasn't the first time he was getting into something like this. He's been involved in similar incidents in the past. In December 1991, he was arrested for fighting outside a Milwaukee bar. In August 1996, he was accused of being in a bar fight in Chicago.
After you at my house. Like, if because I've tried everything to fix my golf game and nothing seemed to work,
But luckily, charges against him were dropped. And just a few months before the Orlando incident, a jury had rejected a $550,000 lawsuit from a man claiming he'd been beat up at a Cleveland nightclub. He wasn't so lucky in evading the law at other times. The player was caught driving under the influence and ended up in jail. Back in 2008, Barkley was driving in downtown Scottsdale, Arizona, when he ran a stop sign after midnight. An officer from the East Valley DUI task force made him pull over. He smelled alcohol on Barkley and was taking a field sobriety test. It was made clearer that the player was drunk. It was even more obvious when he didn't allow the officer to perform a breathalyzer test at the scene. He was taken to the DUI command center, where he consented to have blood drawn, but his alcohol content was not available for a few days after his arrest. Gossip sites had even shared the reasons why he'd got caught speeding, claiming that he was going to meet a woman. They'd also dug up credit card receipts showing that he paid for 6 bottles of booze worth $300 each and even left a $350 tip. Barkley pleaded guilty to drunk driving charges in Scottsdale and served 5 days in jail. He had to enter an alcohol awareness program and even paid more than $2,000 in fines. His blood alcohol level was revealed to be 0.149% when he was pulled over, nearly twice the legal limit of 0.08% in Arizona.
Mad at your dad if it didn't work. So I was wrong on that point, but he could have been a better father, but today we're cool.
Barkley apologized for the incident and took a 6-week leave of absence from his job at TNT. While this was a one-off, some of his dangerous habits have lasted his entire life, like how his name is synonymous with his gambling addiction. Unlike other athletes who try their best to keep their darker sides hidden from the public, Barkley has never been ashamed of his gambling addiction, and that's why he's always been pretty open about it. Back in 2007, he finally revealed the true extent of his habits. He admitted to playing a lot of blackjack and estimated that he'd won about $700,000 that weekend. Between time spent at the table and a massive bet he placed on the Indianapolis Colts, Barkley also admitted to losing over $10 million from sports betting. His losses kept growing over the years, getting somewhere between $10 and $30 million. The interesting bit is that Barkley was self-aware the entire time. He knew he was on a dangerous path, but he couldn't stop gambling either, because it just didn't affect his personal life. He could afford the dangerous passion, so he chose to keep going. But in 2008, Barkley hit a breaking point after his problem with gambling left him in legal trouble. On a trip to Las Vegas, he ended up taking $400,000 worth of credit at the Wynn Casino. The casino sued him for failing to pay back the loan, but after being threatened with criminal prosecution, he paid up. Despite his excessive involvement with gambling, Barkley has spoken out against the increase in sports betting. His gambling habits don't really affect people around him, so no one really minds. It's the questionable comments he's made over the years that have made people angry. He's spoken about race, politics, and gender, and none of it was welcomed. Then there was that time he threatened to hit a female reporter. He also passed a comment about how ugly girls have great personalities and how hard-working guys can play basketball. He also made a controversial joke about white guys and groupies. Barkley's political opinions were no less than controversial either. In one interview, he said that black people treat gay people worse than anyone else. These comments were pretty bizarre and misplaced, especially after the Colorado Springs shooting. He's also been supportive of police officers, which didn't sit well with many people in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. The player has been accused of downplaying the issue of police brutality and failing to see the systemic racism that affects people of color. After all of this, is it possible for him to redeem himself? He's kept his popularity in the sports world. After leaving the NBA, he's been working as a television analyst for TNT's NBA coverage, and has even won more than a couple of Emmy Awards for his work. Barkley has also used his platform to advocate for social justice issues, including education and prison reform. In recent years, he's looked back at his past mistakes and expressed regret for his behavior. He's been more cautious with his comments and has shown a willingness to listen and learn from others. On top of that, he's also an advocate for mental health and has spoken openly about his struggles with depression. For some people, his past mistakes can't be forgiven, but others see him as an example of redemption and growth. And that was Charles Barkley's dark past, finally explained.